Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jenelle Riley from Variety. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce actors Elle Fanning, Chloë Sevigny, and Colton Ryan from The Girl from Plainville. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. This is an audience of your fellow actors. So I actually always like to start at the beginning by asking, how did you get your SAG card? What was the job that brought that card to you? And let's start with Chloë.
My second film was directed by Steve Buscemi. It's called Trees Lounge. He wrote and directed it, and it was a cast of all like New York character actors: Carol Kane, Seymour Cassell, just this amazing cast. And I joined SAG to do that picture.
That was only your second film? That's amazing.
My first film was Kids, directed by Larry Clark, written by Harmony Korine, and that was a non-SAG picture.
Whoa, interesting.
Elle, what about for you?
For me, I mean, I wonder, I think it's like, don't you have to speak in something to get, that's what I've heard. Cause now I'm thinking, cause I guess my first film, technically I played my sister Young in I Am Sam, but I don't know if I had to get my SAG card for that. Like all I had to do was just swing in a swing and like lay on the grass for probably 15 minutes. Like I was 2 years old. But it was probably Door on the Floor. I was 4 and I played Jeff Bridges and Kim Basinger's daughter. We filmed in the Hamptons. I remember that. And Jeff Bridges and I would draw all the time. Like that was our in-between takes. We would go and like draw little pictures with like crayons. And I do remember that.
Not like a sexy thriller.
Yeah, kind of. There's like an affair, it's like, totally. That's it.
Colton, for you?
I was also 4 when I got my card. Enjoyed the labor union. Just kidding. I was 21. And isn't there like that rule where you can do like 3 projects before you have to or something like that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I did like my like SVU joint, my little rite of passage in New York, and an indie flick called Adam. But I got it on Homeland is when that was my big first venture, I guess.
On Law and Order, were you a killer?
What do you think?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that they thought you were the killer for the first 3/4, and then it was revealed you were not. It's
the exact opposite, actually. I'm supposed to be the red herring, like, oh, he looks like the nice guy. Okay. And then it's like, oh, actually, that's the face of evil.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And I've probably seen that episode somewhere along the way. I'll have to go back and look.
Go revisit. It's good.
Show. Yeah. So The Girl from Plainville is inspired by the true story of Michelle Carter and the texting suicide case. I'm curious for each of you, what did you know about this story when the project came to you, or what did you think you knew? And maybe found out that you didn't know so much about it. And let's start with Elle.
I probably, when the court case was happening and it was it was flashed across the media, I felt like it was always on the news or on the cover of magazines. And I so remember seeing this blonde girl with very intense eyebrows and kind of this smug look. And like those pictures were just everywhere at the time. The case, I wasn't following it intensely. I knew that it had something to do with texting and her coercing him. But like the media tends to do, it definitely was, it was a very one-dimensional take on the story. And, even Conrad, who was very much the victim in this, he was portrayed very one-dimensionally as well. We didn't get to know much of his backstory or who he was as a young man. And much like Michelle too, she was really the Black widow manipulator, and the media didn't really dive deeper. But I did, realize, this is kind of the first generation of us seeing how technology has kind of impacted, and it's kind of the first generation to do so. So I think the case really, kind of riveted the world because it has to do with how we still are learning to navigate the world of technology and the false intimacy of texting. And, their whole relationship was predominantly on these on text. They only met a handful of times. So it's really a modern story and sheds light on mental health and our youth today. And, but I didn't know the deeper side to it. I just kind of knew what the media told to us.
Sure. Colton, for you?
Well, I always preface this by saying that, this is very parallel to like, I think I speak for Elle too, like we're around the same age. So we were very young. I'm actually the same age as Coco would be. And so I was going into college. I just got my first New York Times student subscription, which is a lot cheaper. I was trying to get more involved. But I remember at the time thinking that it wasn't really for me because it was just felt so hollow. Like the way it was being approached, the outlets it was coming out in, it just kind of felt like, oh, that's something you kind of see in the grocery store, but you don't really, you know about it, but what's the heart there? I mean, there's no story. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, as we got closer, and especially upon the way it came into my life, into my inbox, like reading the log line alone, I didn't associate the two things because it sounded familiar, but it was so emotional and it was so consequential that it did not immediately click that these were the same case, the same idea. And yeah, so that's when I, of course, went the deep dive and realized like, oh my God, this is actually not just important and timely, but it's very precious. We kind of have to do this.
Chloë, for you, what did you know about the story and what interested you in wanting to be a part of this project?
I'm sad to say I didn't know very much. I mean, I had only seen photos of Michelle on magazine covers, like Elle was saying, around, walking around Manhattan. I live in New York, and, it was ever-present newsstands. And I remember being struck by her and automatically thinking like she was guilty and a bitch and all these other things, just projecting everything onto this beautiful, what looked like rich white girl, just like automatically assuming she was evil. And I didn't really know much else. And then I heard about the show and I got sent some of the scripts. And the first thing I did was Google Michelle Carter, and I saw images of her, and I Googled Lynn and images of Lynn. And then I watched the documentary and was just like floored by the case, by everything it was bringing up. I was just very struck by Lynn, by her demeanor, her personality, how she spoke about Conrad, how important it was for people to hear this story in its entirety from all its angles. And that really incentivized me to join the project. Not only was I attracted to all the talent involved, from the writers, the directors, Elle, I said, like, if all these people whose work I so admire and respect, Lisa Cholodenko, that like this is something that probably is more than what it seems, and it proved to be so.
Elle and Chloë, I know that you've played real people before. How much of a responsibility do you feel when you're embodying a real person, and does it change your approach at all, or do you like having material to draw on?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I guess I've played real people, but more historical figures that aren't around anymore. So not people that are really alive. And really, I guess, I think the image of like the physicality of Michelle Carter is really well known. So it's trying to get that right, but also not being a caricature of a person or trying to mimic too much. I think for me, it's like, yes, I think all of us each day, we had to bring the sensitivity and a thoughtfulness, knowing that these families are still alive and that a life was lost. But I think in order to play a character, I didn't speak with Michelle personally, and you have to almost, once you're getting into it, separate yourself from the real person, because we don't know all the answers. We have a lot of resources that we could talk to people, but at the same time, you're having to build a character and try to figure out how to understand her. And I don't think, I don't have to agree with the things she's done, but you can't necessarily judge a character that you're playing. So, I had there's a lot of, the court was on YouTube, but other than her, we don't hear her actually speak. I had one little sound bite of her when the police officer takes her phone away at school. So that is recorded. So I did get to listen to that, but it was very small. Obviously like physically and stuff, we had just the costume and hair and makeup were so authentic and so detail oriented with that. So that does a lot of work for you. But yeah, I think for me, it was just trying to get into the psyche of this girl and also being a teenage girl too is a very specific time. It's a very vulnerable time. That age you're very impressionable. I think especially with Michelle, she really was desperate to fit in and desperate for attention and feeling that isolation. That was honestly putting myself in those shoes, which is the character that really, Liz and Patrick wrote. It's really in the scripts. But we also had access to the text messages, which were really haunting to read. But then at the same time, like it really tracks these teenage love story. Like it's like there's silliness in there. They're really open. They're really truthful. You can tell that they're very troubled, but it's it's a whole relationship in these messages. So that was for sure helpful.
Chloë, what about for you?
There's different levels of playing, someone known, unknown, but known, as in like people are familiar with this case, but Lynn is not, famous as much as Lynn has been on camera. And I drew from that and was very into, how grounded she was, this like sense of humor that came through, her spirituality that came through. You're still only seeing her in front of the camera. And we're always putting on a face in front of the camera. So in a way, I was like, I'm going to try and do that because that's what she wants the world to see. So, I tried to just capture as much as that I could in her rhythm of speaking. Her accent was very light. She would hit a few words here and there. But there is, a very heavy sense of responsibility and, especially around these true crime things. And when someone doesn't necessarily want to be famous, but, their cases have just, become these fascinating things for the world over and they're thrown into the spotlight. And so there's a lot of sensitivity that you want to protect these people. You want to serve the story. It's a confusing thing to do, in all honesty.
Colton, I don't know if this is the first time you've actually played someone real before, but where did you even begin with your research and preparation?
It is my first time. So that was in itself like exciting and also profoundly kind of changed the way I looked at the whole thing. The preparation for it was, there was a lot of aspects to tackle. Of course, there is just so much information on this boy, but it's all through the lens of the justice system. Mm-hmm. And not that is one way to look at something, but it is a very binary way. It's very like you look at someone's actions and it says, is this good or evil? Is it just or unjust? And I found like, okay, we have to have other ways into this because, if they're only looking at one aspect of his life, specifically how we got to this very, very tragic event, what does the 99% of the rest of the day look like, right? And so there's obviously there's the healthcare aspect that was very important. And I think all of us kind of had a sort of lifeline with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And they were just kind of the best resource. Plus I worked individually with a social worker because I also just wanted to know what that was going to look like, knowing that this is a visual medium. It's like, all right, of course you're dealing with this thing, but you've shocked every single person around you with your actions, with, unfortunately, your ending. So what does that look like day to day? What does that performance look like? Which I thought was more in the conversation of mental health and destigmatizing it. It felt like that pushed past where the buck was stopping, because obviously in our day-to-day lives, we still feel this deep desire, like Coco, to hide it. There's still this like stronger urge, even though we're talking about it, to keep it buried away. And so that really was where most of my research kind of went to.
Elle, how much does it help? You can do all this preparation for a role, but then, when the trailer dropped, people couldn't believe how much you looked like Michelle. I'm curious how you sort of went about transforming physically to play her, and how much it helps as an actor, that final step, getting into hair and makeup and even costume, the pieces sort of fall into place.
God, it helps me so much. I feel like the first time that because I only had 2 weeks between the second season of The Great and Plainville. So it was a real 180, 360. I don't know. It was intense to go from such drastic, very different sets. But we filmed in Savannah, but arriving there and being, doing the costume fitting right away always kind of grounds me and makes me feel like, okay, maybe I can do this, because you put on clothes and you can't help but just the wheels start turning for me. I don't know. You start figuring out the way that she might walk, or especially her body shape changes throughout, because it's 7 years of this show. So, there is obviously the courtroom look that she's kind of famous for, but through high school and even her initial mugshot, you would look at photos of Michelle and she really was like a chameleon. She looked like so many different people. Her facial structure even changed. And, there was talk of possibly doing prosthetics, and we did a lot of hair and makeup tests. And then, basically, I guess our hair and makeup was just so great that they figured out a way to do it without having to do hours of prosthetics every day, which was amazing. I did wear a forehead piece to change my hairline in the courtroom, but other than that, that was it. I think in the Savannah heat too, and the really, we'd had no time. You never have enough time to do anything on these shows, so you're always rushing around, and prosthetics would have not been great. But it's just, we had so many artists that were able to, to show the many different phases of Michelle. And I really enjoyed that. I don't think I've done it to this degree of really morphing into someone and having to look like someone that people know. And I did enjoy it. So I would like to do it again. I liked the challenge. Yeah.
Did it weird you out the first time you saw yourself as Michelle, as much as the whole internet seemed to be weirded out by it?
Me, it kind of did. It was eerie. Also Mirren found the exact clothes that she wore in court, from Ann Taylor and Chico's and the specific brands. So it was the clothes that she had on. Not the actual, but the same prints, everything. And it was very eerie. I didn't feel like myself, but I think when you look in the mirror and you don't see yourself and you're kind of lost in it, it's there is a bit of victory inside. You're yes, you feel good. It's I think we might've done it. So yeah, spooky.
The whole ensemble of this series is so impressive. I would love to know about working with one another, because Elle and Colton, we really have to see how these two connected in their scenes together. And it feels strange to talk about chemistry, but that it is a type of chemistry. And same with Chloe and Colton. We really believe you as mother and son. I don't know if it's just good acting and you show up to the set ready to do that, or if that's something that you develop as you're working together.
Good acting. It's great writing, great directing, great showrunners that really allow you to live with the material, and also the style of acting that they wanted for the show. This wasn't super heightened, high stakes, crazy, over the top acting. This was grounded, real, connecting, heavy, but they're acting. And that's a real testament, I think, to our producers and showrunners and Hulu, that they allowed us to give these kinds of performances, that they allowed a lot of silence and just moments for us to kind of live with each other on screen.
Well, I just wanted to toot their horns, because these are two extraordinary women, two very accomplished women. And so as much as it was important to get these connections right, I'm not taking it for granted or the honor that is you acknowledging that that we seem believable, because I was very I was nervous, to say the least, to work with these two up close, but I think the trust ended up just being there. And I think that really goes a lot to, as being someone still a little bit new to the game, that's just a huge toot to these two for being, they're just the best at what they do.
Well, Colton, I think everyone can say, like, anyone that I've talked to, like my family, my friends, like, no one can believe how great you are. Like, honestly, you're so amazing. And because it's also a specific type of pain. And I think it's very authentic and not, I don't know how you did it, but it just feels so authentic to a single man's journey. Like, it's not like you're trying to incorporate everyone's pain who's feeling this. It's like, feels so specific. And each day, I know how hard you worked, and being able to do the scenes with you. And we really have, it's acting for sure, but also, like, I love you to death. Like, we really are close. And I think to have people around you, especially with such intense subject matter, that, like, you can kind of, like, look at each other and they know what you're going through. And I think we definitely had those moments of, like, God, this is a lot. And you can lean on each other and feel the support. It is rare, because sometimes that, like, you're sometimes out there alone and you don't, have it. So it was a special set. I think all of us felt like we were really doing something, I don't know, profound, weirdly. It just felt that way. Like,
yeah, there was.
So listen, you're great, and here's why. Let's just go back and forth. This is
great. I am curious, though, because I know you obviously shot this during the pandemic. Was there any kind of a chemistry read, or were you able to meet?
No.
Oh, wow. So you showed up on set and had to go.
I kind of expected there to be a lot more, because I just did it like this on Zoom 2 times. And then I kind of was like, okay, well, no, not with you. No, I remember, because that was a part of it. I was like, well, inevitably, we'll read something together. And they were like, see you in Savannah. I was like, okay.
Elle, you referenced how, intense it could get on set. I'm curious for each of you. Some of these scenes are so heartbreaking, and it has to be a challenging place to be emotionally for an extended period of time. What was the atmosphere on set like? And are you able to leave your characters behind at the end of the day, or did you find them, coming home with you sometimes?
The atmosphere on set, a lot of actors, a lot of, like, just, we're all kind of like working character actors. Like, there was a lot of just, like, it felt nice to be around people again and feel a sense of community. We were all talking about, like, our Law and Order stints and, like, stuff. Like, what did you think of the Jeremy Strong interview? And like, a lot of, like, actors stuff. It was really fun. And, like, I think it was just a nice way, like, during the courtroom dramas, like, then we'd all be, like, outside the set, in our chairs, and just, like, connecting over what we do. And that felt really good. And just, like, having that little, like, community again. And yeah, Elle is, like Colton said, she's like this bright, shining light, and she was our leader, and she set the tone a lot of the time. You have directors coming and going, like, we had some repeat, but, like, there's someone who's, like, a consistent through line, and, like, Elle was that for us, and Liz Hannah, and, Elle's a producer, and just having someone there and her passion, like, everybody fed off of that. And it just, like, she set a really nice tone. She was very professional, very serious about the work. She would talk openly in front of extras, whoever, like, about the scene. And I think it got everybody, cast and crew alike, really excited about the material and what we were doing. And it was really nice and refreshing. And yeah.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you.
Colton, for you?
As heavy as you can feel. I watched the finale last night and found myself now transitioning to audience member, quite emotional, probably as a lot of people. So as you can imagine, it was heavy, of course, but I don't know if it was a sort of unspoken thing or what, but on set, beyond sort of like, of course, the trust, I think like philosophically there was this agreed upon, I don't know, air that was like, at least I can tell you from my perspective, knowing what happens to Coco and just continually asking the why do this at all? And beyond its importance, I think there was just this unspoken, like, but we're here. Like, if we're not fighting for joy and for laughter and companionship and all these things, it would be a disservice to all the things that he was, that so many young people are, that I don't know. Beyond the heaviness, there was an equal, if not superseded, balance of light. And I think it's actually what makes this material sort of fly. I think you can feel it in each frame.
Elle, for you?
Gosh, for me, well, I guess kind of part of your question, like talking about like if, bringing it back each day, I'm not someone that, I don't know. It's weird. It's like staying in character. It's just like a weird subconscious place that you go to. But then after, cut, I'm like, we're goofing around. Like I'm not like the most serious person. But when it comes to you're in the scene, it's almost like I need to like shed that for a sec and then be able to come back. Like it was funny. I did like a film with Cameron Crowe once, and there was like a big kind of emotional scene, and he would play music a lot, and it was, you would think, okay, he might, put on really sad music, and he put on like Peanut Butter Jelly Time. That song that's like peanut butter. Yes, that song. Like it always stuck. I was young when I did that film, but it stuck with me because it's like, and I was like, what are you doing? And it actually made me so emotional because it was like the switch. And it's like, if you're thinking about something that's too intense, like you need the break and like you need to laugh. So that's always stuck with me. And I think that was kind of something with this. It's like, it's so intense that you kind of just have to be able to get to that place. You have to kind of go the opposite way. So, that was kind of, my thing. Obviously it was during the pandemic too, which everyone was we were in our own little bubble. We, didn't do a ton of going out like maybe we normally would have, but, I would, just go back to my apartment and get ready for the day, watch some Glee and get ready to go back to work.
Now, were you watching Glee in order to prepare as Michelle? Or because I never seen, I had seen some episodes, but I hadn't like really, when it came out, I wasn't like watching all the time. So I knew that obviously Glee was a really big part of Michelle. So I watched Fault in Our Stars again. I had seen that a couple of years ago. And then I would watch some episodes of Glee. And then like specifically the Make You Feel My Love, Leah singing that. To get ready for that, I would watch it. I know that Chloe, you watched the 48 Hours all the time, you said, right?
Yeah, 48 Hours.
Yeah, so that was kind of like my 48 Hours. Yeah.
Audio files cut together of Lynn's interviews, and I would listen to that every morning in the trailer. And that was kind of my process of immersing myself. But after work, lots of podcasts to kind of like just, get involved in other people's stories and kind of, let my brain turn off. I remember when I was shooting Big Love, I got really into some other series, specifically, what was the other HBO, the death one?
Bored to Death?
6 Feet?
6 Feet Under.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I started like acting like Frances Conroy's character. I was like doing my character Nikki as the Frances. I was like, I can't stop. I can't watch other series while I'm shooting the series. It was I got so mixed up my head. It was a very wild experience.
Well, it makes me want to go back and watch Big Love now. You mentioned Glee, which is, an important part of Michelle's story and her obsession with that show. I'm sort of curious, when you learned that about her, was that a big insight into her character? Did that, give you something to sort of grab hold of? And as an executive producer, I'm curious sort of what the conversations were like when I shouldn't say you, but when that part of the story was included.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was almost, there was a time where we thought that we weren't going to get any of the rights to Glee. So that was a very scary time because the pilot was already written and that last scene was, really written out in the way that it ended up being in the film, but in the show. But that's like, so what drew me, I mean, obviously the story and everything, but that scene was just like, as an actor, I was like, terrified of it, but the challenge of it, I was so excited about. And there was a time where they thought that like, we would only be able to show like Leah for like a second and couldn't use the music at all. And we're like, oh God, like the scene might not have even happened. Like we would have had to come up with something else. So that was, that would have been really disappointing, but luckily Hulu kind of saved the day there and they got the rights. But I did, kind of saying like it cracked the code a little bit for me of like getting inside Michelle's head. Cause Glee, I think the show when it came out is such a show for the underdog or the outsiders that feel like they can come together and feel like they're in a community. And I think for Michelle, that's probably, my opinion, but probably maybe why she loved it and why so many do love it. But she could be the star of her own YA fantasy. And I mean, as an actor, I live in fantasy land a lot of the time. So I could slightly relate to that and, needing to remind myself to stay grounded. And I think our show really beautifully kind of plays with the blurred lines of fantasy and reality. And we have a lot of fantasy sequences. And it's a clever way because I think technology in a lot of ways is a fantasy. Like you can project your own emotions, you can project your own thoughts, you can be who you want to be. You don't have to, you can use a different name, you can, entirely reinvent yourself. And I'm like, okay, I kind of get who Michelle is and that whole world of wanting to create this narrative for herself. Kind of like light bulb went off and it helped me a lot.
We are in a world that is so focused on social media and electronics. I'm curious if working on this project at all sort of affected your perceptions of, the possible harmful effects of all this technology. Yeah, I'm sure you probably had discussions on set about this. Has it changed your relationship with your phone?
No.
Yes. Oh,
like
no.
My phone's right here. I'm like, oh God, I know.
When people text me and you're out running around, you see something and you're like, oh, I can't really respond to this, or like, I don't have the time to like really do it the way I should. Sometimes I'm like, listen, I just say, I can't right now. I'm running around or something, but I want to hear what you have to say or something. It's like, it's very hard because there's this like pressure for immediate response. And sometimes you get things from friends and you're like, this person really needs me, but I can't be there for them right now. And if I'm not there right now, that might make them spiral more. So it's like trying to figure out how to navigate that. I've been thinking a lot more about and like, when is the right time? And do I send this flippant quick thing or do I wait? And like, just like how to be there for people that need you in the right way. Mm-hmm. And have time for people. Yeah.
I had like right when this ended, the pendulum swung like the other way, where I got in this anxious spiral of like, should I own like an NFT? Should I buy like 10? Should I buy a lot in the Sandbox metaverse? I don't know. And it made me so anxious because a lot of times with the show, the word kind of that kept, sort of percolating in my mouth was like value. Like one of the really tragic things about these two young people is that they do something that's incredibly normal, which is try to find themselves through each other, try to grow up and be something that they're not currently, what they aspire to be. But the way they do it is online. They value that connection more online than in the real world. Mm-hmm. And I just think we're really at like this weird crux moment where that word gets thrown around quite a lot of being like, oh, well, at some point we might actually all collectively value our lives online. In the same way of like, I don't leave the house without my phone because I'm scared I'll be lost if I get lost, which I never do, but it's you prioritize sort of these other things. And so, it's been a strange relationship to like post about the series on Instagram for sure. Try to like promote it, and actually just participate in that way. But I think that's why the show is really special because it actually asks you to like, hey, maybe we should pause for a sec.
Yeah.
Did you get an NFT?
No, I was outbid quite a lot. I don't own any Bored Apes. I don't own any doodles. I don't, but I have an education now on it.
I think like as an actor or as like a public person, some of these social media sites, or Instagram specifically, can be empowering because we lose control of our images so much. There's so much about us on the internet that we can't control, and that is so daunting and terrifying. So there's like these few avenues as a public person that you can be like, this is how I want to be seen. This is my narrative. This is what I want to project. And, and certain times that can be super stressful because you're like, okay, now I have to maintain this thing. So I feel like a lot of actors, you can see they kind of do it. They dip their toes in, they dig them out, and some people run with it. Some others, like I think Colton has done a really beautiful job of promoting the show through it, which is very tricky. Or just talking about the show and doing these beautiful tributes to other actors and that was a tangent. Sorry.
No.
Makes sense.
Well, again, congratulations on a beautiful series. On behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you all so much for sharing your experiences, process, and craft with your fellow performers. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Go
Always.
SAG.
Yeah.